The job board at Galactic Central Station scrolled endlessly with positions that Rose would never qualify for. Her antennae drooped as she watched another rejection notification flash across her personal device. That made it the 40th rejection this cycle, and her credits were running dangerously low. Species requirement: quadrupedal locomotion only. Must have natural bioluminescence. Minimum 6 manipulator appendages required. Crystalline-based lifeforms preferred. Rose's 2 arms, bipedal stance, and completely ordinary carbon-based biology made her an outsider in the bustling space station. Her people, the Neridians, were relatively new to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 3 generations ago. Most established species viewed them as primitive, unreliable, and, worst of all, inefficient. She slumped against the viewport, watching the countless ships dock and depart. Each vessel carried crews of various species, all working together in perfect harmony, except for her kind. The transparent aluminum showed her reflection, blue-tinted skin that other species found unsettling, feather-like sensory filaments where hair should be, and eyes that were just a bit too large. Everything about her screamed evolutionary disadvantage to potential employers. The station's artificial day cycle was winding down when her device chimed with an unusual notification. Instead of the standard rejection template, this one contained a personalized message. Noticed you've been applying. Interested in cargo handling? Human-operated vessel. No experience needed. Traditional species requirements waived. Dock 394. Captain Rivers. Rose blinked at the message several times. Humans were among the newest arrivals to the galactic community, even more recent than her own people. They were considered unpredictable, dangerous, and inefficient by most species. Yet somehow, they'd managed to carve out a niche in interstellar shipping, taking routes other species considered too risky or unprofitable. She hesitated for only a moment before gathering her few belongings. Working with humans might be seen as career suicide by many, but after 40 rejections, she was out of options. Besides, there was something appealing about the direct, no-nonsense tone of the message. No lengthy species requirements, no efficiency ratings needed, just a simple offer of work. As she made her way to Dock 394, Rose couldn't help but wonder if she was making a terrible mistake. But deep down, she knew that sometimes the best opportunities came from the most unexpected sources, even if those sources happened to be the galaxy's most controversial species. The cargo ship that awaited her was unlike anything she'd seen before. While most vessels in the station displayed sleek, standardized designs, this one was a patchwork of different materials and modifications. The name, Lucky Break, was painted on the hull in both standard galactic and human English. It wasn't pretty, but it had character, much like its species of origin. Rose took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and walked toward the ship's entry ramp. Whatever waited aboard, it had to be better than being rejected for the 41st time. At least humans, like her people, knew what it felt like to be underestimated by the galactic community. Perhaps that's exactly why they'd given her this chance. As Rose approached the entry ramp of the Lucky Break, a figure emerged from the shadows of the cargo hold. The human was shorter than she'd expected, with weathered skin and gray-streaked hair tied back in a simple knot. Most striking were the laugh lines around her eyes, a feature Rose had learned was unique to humans, marking their emotional expressions over time. "You must be the applicant," the human said, extending a hand. "I'm Captain Rivers." "Just Rivers is fine." Rose stared at the outstretched hand, her sensory filaments quivering with uncertainty. She'd studied human customs during her xenocultural studies, but experiencing them firsthand was different. Carefully, she reached out and completed the handshake, noting how warm human skin felt compared to her own. "I'm Rose," she replied, trying to match the captain's direct manner. "Thank you for considering my application." Rivers gestured for her to follow into the ship. The interior was even more surprising than the exterior. While most galactic vessels maintained strict organizational protocols, the Lucky Break seemed to follow its own unique logic. Cargo containers of various sizes were secured with a mix of standard magnetic locks and what appeared to be primitive mechanical straps. Most ships won't touch these runs, Rivers explained, patting a nearby container. Too many variables, they say. Too many uncharted regions. But that's where the real opportunities are. Rose's antennae perked up. Uncharted regions? Isn't that dangerous? Rivers laughed, a sound that echoed through the cargo hold. Life's dangerous. The real question is whether the reward is worth the risk. She stopped and turned to face Rose directly. Look, I'll be honest with you. This isn't a prestigious position. We don't have the latest AI systems or automated cargo handlers. We do things the old way, with our hands and our heads. That's exactly what I need, Rose found herself saying. Every other position requires years of experience with specific systems I've never had access to. How can I gain experience if no one will give me a chance? Exactly. Rivers slapped the nearest cargo container, making Rose jump. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The galaxy's gotten too specialized, too rigid. Sometimes you need someone who can think on their feet, not just follow programming. They reached the ship's small crew area, where Rose noticed something else unusual. The environmental controls were set to accommodate multiple species' comfort ranges, creating distinct zones throughout the space. The pay isn't great to start, Rivers continued, but it's fair. You'll get a cut of each successful delivery, plus basic room and board. We run a 3-person crew, me, my engineer Tom, and now hopefully you as our cargo specialist. Rose's sensory filaments trembled with excitement. Not only was this human offering her a job, but they were offering her a title, responsibility, a chance to prove herself. When can I start? She asked. Rivers smiled, those distinctive laugh lines deepening. How about now? We've got a shipment of medical supplies bound for the outer colonies. The standard carriers won't touch it because of some political nonsense, but people out there need these supplies. As Rose helped secure the last of the cargo for departure, she realized something profound. While the rest of the galaxy saw humans as primitive and inefficient, they had something unique. The ability to see past surface differences and recognize potential in unexpected places. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Rose felt a surge of hope. Maybe being inefficient, by galactic standards, wasn't such a bad thing after all. Maybe sometimes the best way forward wasn't the most obvious path, but the one that required a little faith and a willingness to take chances. The Lucky Break pulled away from Galactic Central Station, its engines thrumming with a rhythm that felt somehow different from the standardized vessels Rose was used to. She stood at the cargo bay viewport, watching the massive station shrink into the distance, when a new voice startled her. So you're our new cargo specialist? Welcome aboard! Rose turned to find a tall human male wiping his hands on a stained cloth. His dark skin glistened with what she recognized as human perspiration, and he wore a utility vest covered in pockets and tools. I'm Tom, the engineer, he said, following the same hand-extending ritual Captain Rivers had performed. Just finished tweaking the drive core. She's running smooth as silk now. Rose completed the handshake, already feeling more confident with the gesture. The engine sound is unique, she observed. I've never heard anything quite like it. Tom's face lit up with pride. That's because we've modified it with some human innovations. The standard galactic drives are efficient, sure, but they can't handle the stress of frontier running. We need something more adaptable. As if to demonstrate his point, the ship shuddered slightly as it entered FTL. Rose's antennae vibrated with the change in spatial pressure, but she noticed the humans didn't seem bothered at all. Speaking of adaptable, Captain Rivers called from the bridge entrance. We've got our first challenge. Latest reports show an ion storm forming along our planned route. Standard procedure would be to wait it out at the nearest station. Rose's heart sank. Delays meant lost profits, and she desperately needed this job to work out. But to her surprise, both humans were grinning. Time to show our new crew member how we handle things? Tom asked, already moving toward the engine room. Exactly. Rivers nodded. Rose, come up to the bridge. You're about to see why human ships have a reputation for being crazy enough to work. The bridge was smaller than standard vessels, with manual controls alongside the expected neural interfaces. Rivers sat in the pilot's chair, hands hovering over both sets of controls. Standard ships can't navigate ion storms because their automated systems get scrambled, she explained. But humans? We've been dealing with unpredictable weather since we first took to the seas on Earth. We just need to read the patterns. Rose watched in amazement as Rivers pulled up a holographic display of the storm. Instead of the usual computational projections, she was looking at something that resembled art, swirling patterns of energy painted across space. See those eddies? Rivers pointed. They're just like ocean currents. If we time it right. She grabbed the manual controls, and the ship began to dance. The lucky break. Dove into the storm's outer edges, weaving between massive tendrils of ionic energy. Rose's antennae tingled with the electromagnetic interference, but the ship's modified shields held steady. Tom's voice came over the comm system, calling out power adjustments as they needed them. This is impossible, Rose whispered, watching as Rivers guided them through the chaos with an almost intuitive grace. The mathematical probabilities of successfully navigating an ion storm are. Don't tell me the odds. Rivers laughed, using what Rose would later learn was a human cultural reference. Sometimes you have to trust your gut more than your computer. As they emerged from the other side of the storm, hours ahead of schedule and with all systems intact, Rose understood something fundamental about humans. While other species had evolved toward perfect efficiency, humans had evolved to embrace imperfection, to thrive in chaos, to find opportunities where others saw only obstacles. Now that, Rivers said, leaning back in her chair with satisfaction, is why they call us the lucky break. Not because we're actually lucky, but because we make our own luck. Rose looked at her new captain with growing respect. Perhaps the rest of the galaxy had it wrong. Maybe true efficiency wasn't about following the safest path, but about finding new ways forward when the safe path was blocked. 3 weeks into her new job, Rose discovered that working with humans meant expecting the unexpected. The lucky break had just docked at Port Beta, a remote outpost on the edge of settled space, when their cargo manifest triggered an alert. What do you mean our medical supplies are illegal? Rivers demanded, facing down a towering insectiport official. These colonies need these medications. The official's mandibles clicked disapprovingly. New regulation. All medical supplies must now be processed through Central Medical Authority. No exceptions. Rose watched the exchange from near the cargo bay, her antennae drooping. She'd spend hours organizing these supplies, knowing they were destined for colonies suffering from a rare genetic condition. The thought of all that medicine sitting unused while people suffered made her sick. Rose, Tom called softly from behind her. Remember that trick you showed me with the cargo manifests last week? She turned to him, confused. You mean when I explained how the standard categorization system has multiple valid classification codes for the same item? Tom's eyes sparkled with that distinctly human look of mischief. Exactly. How fast can you reclassify our cargo? Understanding dawned. Rose hurried to the ship's computer terminal, her fingers flying across the interface. The medical supplies were technically also classified as biological research materials under Section 47B of the Galactic Trade Code. It wasn't a lie, it was simply an alternate truth. Within minutes, she had updated their entire manifest. The medication was still there, but now it was listed under its alternate classification code. When she finished, Rivers was still arguing with the port official, keeping him distracted. Captain, Rose called out, trying to keep her voice steady. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. Our cargo is actually classified as biological research materials. Here's the updated manifest. The official's compound eyes scanned the new documents. Everything was technically correct, filed under proper codes that had existed for centuries. After what felt like an eternity, he stamped their clearance. Proceed. He clicked, turning away stiffly. But expect an efficiency audit on your next visit. Once they were safely away from the dock, Rivers burst out laughing. Rose, that was brilliant! You just out-bureaucrat a bureaucrat. I didn't lie, Rose said carefully. I just used the system's own rules creatively. Is that wrong? Tom clapped her on the shoulder, another human gesture she was getting used to. Wrong? That's exactly what we hired you for. You understand their system better than they do, and you're not afraid to think outside the box. Outside the box? Rose's antennae twitched at the unfamiliar phrase. Human expression, Rivers explained. It means finding solutions that aren't obvious. Traditional species might call it inefficient or chaotic, but we call it innovation. Later that night, as Rose helped unload the supplies at the Colonial Medical Center, she watched families receiving their needed medications. A small child with bioluminescent skin, a hybrid of two species, waved at her with tentacle-like fingers. Thank you, the child's parents said, their crystalline forms shimmering with gratitude. The other shipping companies stopped coming months ago. Too much paperwork, they said. Too inefficient. Rose felt something warm in her chest. Pride, she realized. Not just in helping these people, but in finding a way to do it that no one else had considered. The humans had taught her that sometimes the best solution wasn't the most obvious one, and sometimes rules could be bent without being broken. As they prepared for departure, Rose found herself looking forward to their next challenge. Working with humans was teaching her that efficiency wasn't just about following procedures. It was about understanding why those procedures existed and finding better ways to achieve their goals. Ready for the next run? Rivers asked, already plotting their course to another remote colony. Rose straightened her posture, feeling more confident than she had in years. Ready, Captain? And I've already started reviewing the trade codes for our next port. The humans exchanged knowing smiles. Their newest crew member was learning fast, and teaching them a few things too. 2 months into her new life aboard the Lucky Break, Rose faced her biggest challenge yet. The ship's proximity alerts blared as they approached what should have been a routine stop at Mining Station 47. Multiple distress signals, Rivers announced, her usual casual tone replaced with sharp focus. The station's primary reactor is failing. They've got less than 3 hours before critical failure. Rose's antennae quivered as she processed the emergency data streaming across her console. The station housed over 300 workers from 20 different species, each with their own environmental needs. Standard evacuation protocols would take at least 6 hours. Nearest emergency response vessels? Tom asked, already running diagnostics on their ship's systems. 8 hours out, Rose reported, her voice tight. They'd never make it in time. Rivers' face set in that distinctive human expression that Rose had learned meant they were about to do something either brilliant or crazy, or both. Then I guess we're the rescue committee. Rose, what's our cargo situation? Rose pulled up the cargo bay schematics she'd been reorganizing. We just offloaded at Port Beta. Bays are 80% empty, but... Her eyes widened as she realized what Rivers was suggesting. Captain, even if we removed all non-essential equipment, we could only accommodate about half the station's population under standard safety protocols. Standard protocols? Tom echoed, sharing a meaningful look with Rivers. But what about non-standard protocols? Rivers nodded. Rose, forget everything you know about proper cargo procedures. If this was your last day as a cargo specialist, and you never had to file another efficiency report again, how many people could you fit in those bays? Rose's first instinct was to protest. Breaking safety protocols was unthinkable in her previous positions. But she'd learned that humans had a way of making the unthinkable work. Her fingers flew across the console as she ran new calculations. If we use the maintenance crawl spaces, and set up temporary atmospheric barriers. She paused, double-checking her numbers. We could fit everyone. It would be extremely uncomfortable, and completely against at least 15 different safety regulations, but they'd survive. That's our girl. Rivers grinned, already turning the ship toward the station. Tom, get ready to reroute every bit of power we can spare to life support and artificial gravity. Rose, you're about to become an expert in creative packing. The next 2 hours were controlled chaos. Rose worked faster than she ever had, directing station residents into carefully calculated positions throughout the ship. She used her knowledge of xenobiology to group compatible species together, creating makeshift environmental zones using spare atmospheric filters and emergency force fields. This is insane. A crystalline being complained as Rose guided them into a space that would normally be considered a maintenance shaft. The efficiency ratings for this arrangement are incalculable. Good thing we're not filing for ratings today, Rose replied, surprising herself with how much she sounded like Rivers. Would you prefer to wait for a properly certified rescue vessel? The being's crystals chimed in reluctant acceptance. Just as the last group was secured, the station's reactor reached critical levels. The Lucky Break pulled away with less than 10 minutes to spare, its systems straining under the unprecedented load. Through the viewport, Rose watched the station's reactor finally breach, the explosion thankfully reaching only empty space. Life support holding steady, Tom reported from engineering, his voice tired but proud. It's not pretty, but it's working. Rose, Rivers called from the bridge. Get up here. Rose made her way forward, expecting to find some new crisis to handle. Instead, she found Rivers watching a live feed of the cargo bays. Every available space was filled with survivors, all alive, all safe, all breaking every efficient arrangement protocol in the book. Look at that, Rivers said softly. 300 lives saved because you were willing to think like a human, which means not thinking like everyone else. Rose stood straighter, her antennae high with pride. I had good teachers. Sometimes the best solution is the one that looks impossible until you try it. Couldn't have said it better myself. Rivers smiled. Now, let's get these people to safety before anyone starts filing efficiency complaints. 1 year after joining the crew of the Lucky Break, Rose stood before the Galactic Central Station's Shipping Authority Board. The massive chamber was filled with representatives from every major species, their attention focused on the nervous Neridian with gently swaying antennae. Your petition for a new shipping license classification is unusual. The head administrator, a towering energy being, pulsed with barely concealed disapproval. You propose to create an entire new category of emergency response vessels, crewed by what you call innovative response teams? Yes, Rose replied, standing straighter. She could feel Rivers and Tom's supportive presence behind her. The mining station 47 incident proved that traditional emergency protocols, while efficient under normal circumstances, can fail during complex crisis situations. A crystalline board member chimed in disapproval. Your actions during that incident broke 17 different safety regulations. By all standard metrics, what you did was completely inefficient. Inefficient? Rose felt a very human-like smile spread across her face. 300 beings are alive today because we chose to be inefficient. Sometimes the most efficient solution isn't the best one. She activated the holographic display, showing footage from their past year of operations. The mining station rescue, the ion storm navigation, the medical supply delivery, all examples of problems solved through what she now proudly called human-style innovation. The galaxy is changing, she continued. New colonies are being established in unpredictable regions. Trade routes are expanding into uncharted space. Standard protocols can't always adapt fast enough. But humans taught me that this isn't a problem, it's an opportunity. The board members shifted uncomfortably, but Rose wasn't finished. I'm not asking you to change your existing protocols. I'm asking you to create space for a different approach. Let ships like the Lucky Break handle the situations that don't fit into neat categories. Let us be your backup plan when efficiency isn't enough. And who would crew these vessels? Another administrator asked. Surely not more humans? Anyone who's willing to think differently. Rose answered. I was rejected 40 times before Captain Rivers hired me. Now I'm standing here, proposing a solution that could save countless lives. Imagine how many other beings are out there, waiting for their chance to prove that being different isn't the same as being wrong. A murmur ran through the chamber. Rose's antennae picked up the subtle shift in the room's energy, uncertainty giving way to curiosity. She recognized that feeling. It was the same one she'd experienced when she first read River's job offer. After what felt like an eternity, the head administrator spoke again. Your proposal is irregular, unprecedented, and challenges many of our fundamental assumptions about efficient operation protocols. A pause. It is, therefore, exactly what we may need in these changing times. Petition approved. Rose's antennae quivered with joy as she walked out of the chamber, Rivers and Tom grinning beside her. Outside, a small crowd had gathered, beings who had been rescued by the lucky break, others who had heard their story, and even a few shipping authority officials who had quietly supported their petition. Not bad for someone no one would hire, Rivers said, wrapping an arm around Rose's shoulders. Ready to help us recruit our next crew of beautiful disasters? Rose looked at the crowd, seeing not their different forms or species, but their potential. Among them might be the next brilliant mind who just needed a chance, the next problem solver who saw the universe differently, the next being who could turn inefficiency into innovation. Actually, Rose said, her voice strong and clear, I'd like to captain my own ship. There are a lot more beings out there who deserve the same chance you gave me. Rivers laughed that warm human laugh that had become so familiar. Now that's what I call thinking outside the box. Tom, looks like we need to start shopping for another ship. As they walked toward the docking bay, Rose reflected on how far she'd come. She had arrived at this station desperate for any job, and now she was about to become a captain. All because one human had looked past the surface, ignored the efficiency ratings, and taken a chance on someone who didn't fit the standard mold. Sometimes, she realized, the biggest adventures in life started with a simple word: inefficient.